Call the executive committee meeting to order. Affidavit was posted as appropriately.
Speak into the mic.
Oh, sorry. Call the meeting to order. Affidavit of posting was posted according to statute. Roll call, Supervisor Kelling is excused. Please begin with Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
To begin with, we're going to call a public hearing for the proposed 2022-2023 biennial Washington County budget.
The Washington County biennial budget summary notice of public hearing. The following budget summary is in accordance with section 65.90 of the Wisconsin State Statutes. The Washington County Board of Supervisors is holding a public hearing on the proposed 2022 to 2023 biennial budget today on Wednesday, October 20th, 2021 at 6 p.m. at 432 East Washington Street, room 1019 in West Bend, Wisconsin. The proposed budget in detail was available for public inspection in the budget office at the same address or online through the county website.
Okay, is there any public comment? Okay, we'll open the public hearing. Is there any comment from the public regarding the proposed Washington County budget biennial? Seeing none. Close the public hearing. Begin with County Executive Showman. Oh, Supervisor Mahalik.
Thank you. I just wanted to let Showman know, I think it lends itself to the quality of what you do. People will always come to complain. People very rarely come to praise. And there's nobody here, so they had a lot of praise, obviously. And just as a comment, because we did lower our levy as well, 17 cents in Hartford, we had a bigger crowd than you did. Than you have for the county. And I just wanted to let you know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Executive Showman.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the opportunity. I hope you've all had a chance to read through the budget message, so I obviously won't read it word for word, but I think there are a few things that are worth highlighting, if for nothing else for the recording. First of all, the biggest highlight and thing to underscore, I think, in the entirety of the budget is there are 2 years in this biennium where each year we'll be cutting the levy by $500,000, collectively $1 million over the biennium. This is the first biennial budget we've done. We believe it's the first and probably only biennial budget for a local government, county, village, city, town in the state of Wisconsin. You'll remember that, most of you in this room at least will remember that we advocated to allow for counties to go to biennial budgets if they so chose, and we did that back in January of this year. So we're very excited about being able to present to you a biennial budget, and then on top of it, one that reduces the levy by $1 million over the biennium. So that's a wonderful starting point. Each one of your committees had the opportunity to hear each of your respective departments present on their budget, and what this ultimately results in for taxpayers in 2023. If everything goes as we expect it, we'll be below $2 per thousand on our tax rate for the first time since we think before 1900, which is absolutely incredible. And really that speaks to not only the work that we've done in the last 8 years, reducing tax levy, keeping the amount we collect in check, but also the positive property value growth that we've had in Washington County especially over the last 15 to 20 years post-Great Recession. So those are some of the key highlights. That $1.93 that we anticipate in 2022, that represents almost a 31 cent per thousand drop. Obviously, that's over 10% from 2021 to 2023. It's a significant number. So as I explained to employees in town halls, I'm always trying to balance really three key things when we're looking at budgets. Taxpayers are first, because this, as was explained passionately in the last discussion, this is not our money, this is their money. And we need to be conscious of that all the time. Secondly, it's, and not necessarily in a order after this, but secondly, it's capital expenses and keeping the lights on and maintaining that which that we have that are assets of the taxpayer. And then finally, it's the human resources, the people who actually get the service delivery done, the services that we provide that are so important to people across Washington County. And we're constantly trying to balance and make sure that all three of those are addressed with the taxpayer first. So just a few key highlights that I'll touch on that are in my budget summary. But in the public safety area specifically, there's the addition of a detective position, which you approved a couple of months ago. Now it's actually fully funded throughout the biennium. We're still in the process of finalizing a union contract with the Deputy Sheriff's Association. So you are yet to see that. We're hopeful that before the calendar turns, that'll be in front of the entirety of the county board. Myself, Chairman Bossert of the Public Safety Committee, Chairman Mahalk of the Administrative Committee, and the County Board Chairman have all been part of that discussion, along with the Sheriff and Captain Stacer. Again, we're hopeful that by December, we're able to get something completed. What's budgeted for now for the Deputy Sheriffs is a 3% increase in both years, 22 and 23, which it would keep us basically in the same place of the market. The market is a little different for deputy sheriffs than it is for the other employees in the county. You remember the other employees there's 10 counties we compare ourselves to. There's fewer for the Deputy Sheriff's Association, and that has everything to do with arbitration. We use the other counties that an arbitrator would use if we had to go to arbitration, which means we don't include municipal law enforcement to the dissatisfaction of the Deputy Sheriff's Association. For example, the city of Hartford, the city of West Bend, the village of Kewaskum, they are not comparable to deputy sheriffs, which ends up financially benefiting the county. But that's an important thing to know as you're contemplating in the coming months the Deputy Sheriff's Association contract. Economic growth and vitality. Obviously, we talked before at Land Use and Planning and through our great community and a number of other areas about the creation of a new community development department. That is in this budget. In this particular budget, it is fully grant funded through the American Recovery Plan Act. It actually kind of disperses. There's a kind of a complicated formula for how it goes throughout the entirety of what was formerly known as the Parks and Planning Department. But there is a plan that we showed the Land Use and Planning Committee to kind of draw down the grant over the course of the next two bienniums, so 22-23 and 24-25, and then ultimately bring that back to a tax levy funded situation, which should allow us to kind of have a smoothing effect where the tax rate and the tax levy will feel limited to no impact. And you'll actually, from the tax rate side, you'll still see the tax rate continue to go down. EDWC's double down is now complete. So that means that the revolving loan fund is fully funded, which freed up $2 million. You're going to consider later on in this meeting finalizing that borrowing payment, principal and interest for the radio system. EDWC's double down being done gives us $1 million to go to that. The other $1 million is how we come up with $500,000 cut in 22 and $500,000 cut in 23. So this is basically what you're seeing is the realization of the 5 and 6 year plans that this committee has adopted over the course of the last 8 years, where you've staggered how your investments will fall off, freeing up some of your cash flow for you to be able to reprioritize it. That's exactly what is happening here. So it's a very positive thing, gives us economic benefit by having the revolving loan fund, gives the taxpayers directly back their dollars, which is illustrated earlier, is so important. There's a number of changes in the land resources area. Those have been talked about at length through the land use committees, land use and planning committee, so I won't go into them. But suffice it to say, with the new natural resources director, there's a heavy emphasis on entrepreneurialism in that department, excuse me, it's now a department, similar to what we've kind of implemented with the Parks Fiscal Sustainability Plan. That same kind of culture, mentality, we're asking to drive through land resources itself. That included a restructuring of the land use area, multiple changes in personnel. There was 3 individuals that had several decades of experience. 2 of those 3 have now retired and or moved on. And so that was a major shift for what we've seen really for the last 25 plus years in that division. There's also systematic changes. If you've ever worked with either the land use or land conservation department, but specifically the land use department, there was very paper heavy, kind of old school way of doing business. All of that is changing to be paperless and streamlined, much more efficient. And so that those changes are taking place as well. Under the effective mobility and reliable infrastructure, there's two areas that I would draw your attention to. One is the continuation of funding the transportation sustainability plan. That's fully funded once again in this budget. But tied to that, in the coming biennium, you will be asked to pay off that loan that we took out, what was it, 5 years ago or so, that would fully fund the transportation sustainability plan. When that payment happens, you will have no debt in this area again, plus the fund is funded itself without raising taxes. What that means is those principal and interest payments will go away if you choose to pay it early. They will go away in 24, 25. And so similar to what we had with the EDWC double down, you'll have the same thing with all of that principal and interest liquidity now coming to you, being able to do something very similar to what you just saw here in the 22-23 budget. So again, that's 6 or 7 years of you strategically planning. Those 6-year financial plans become very important because the seeds you planted 6 years ago are going to start bearing fruit. They did with the EDWC plan. They're now going to do the same thing in 24. And you'll have the ability to consider changes to the budget, additional tax cuts, whatever it is that we decide to present and approve. So that's important. The last thing, and it's not in my report, but it is worth talking about, and the Public Works Committee has talked about it already at length, and we'll continue to talk about it in the coming months. Transit, specifically the Washington County Commuter Express, the funding in that area is changing significantly in this budget. The American Recovery Plan Act, the CARES Act, all basically threw money at the problem. Quite literally, there's nobody riding the buses. I literally mean there's nobody riding the buses in many cases. There's a lot of changes that the Public Works Committee will be contemplating in the coming months, including in the month of December. It sounds like a public hearing will happen. This budget actually pulls out all of the levy from the Washington County Commuter Express. Not the majority of the levy. It's a better way to say it, right, Aaron? Okay, the majority of the levy. We have to have some skin in the game. It's predominantly funded now, not only by the federal funds that have always funded transit, but also by American Recovery Plan Act dollars and previous CARES Act dollars. What I'm trying to tell you is, come 2024, it's a day of reckoning. You will no longer have tax levy funding to keep doing what we've always been doing, which I think is okay because it hasn't been working for quite a long time. It's going to force the public policy discussion amongst all of us on how do we handle transit, or do we just get out of the business? And if we handle transit and we do something different, we've got to come up with new and different tax levy money. In other words, we got to raise taxes to do that something different. So it'll be a good public policy debate, but this budget does force us to have that public policy debate, because I think the board as a whole for a long time has struggled with, Lord knows John Bullough, former Public Works Chair struggled for a long time with, should we even be doing this anymore? Now we're going to force ourselves to have the discussion and put our money where our mouth is or not. So that's an important attribute. Then finally with access to basic needs, the kind of the social services area, there's a number of changes that are happening there as well. I won't belabor Samaritan. You've gotten a number of reports and those things, so I'll leave that speak for itself. But there is a youth justice innovation grant that you're all familiar with. You approved not too terribly long ago, and there's an additional psychiatric social worker position funded through this budget as well. So there's investments, as you've heard, in every single one of those areas. Plus, we're cutting taxes. And then to end kind of on that last leg of human resources, the pay plan that you approved 3 years ago now, and yes, it's been 3 years already, is fully funded. There's a 2% cost of living adjustment funded in this budget, very similar to how you've done it in the past, long before I've been here. There's a 2% merit budgeted in this budget. It's budgeted as 2% flat across the board, but the way that it'll actually work is merit-based. So we do a 5-star rating system. The employees with a 5-star rating can anticipate something close to a 3% increase, a merit increase. The employees closer to a 3% can expect something closer to a 1% increase. And then everyone in between will kind of scale up and down in between. So that's a significant departure. Although 1% to 3% doesn't sound like a lot, when in government, it's always been everybody got 2% just for breathing and getting a 3-star or above. This is a huge shift psychologically for everybody. So I've spent a lot of time in town hall meetings explaining how that will work and how it's tied to evaluations, the evaluation system you approved several years ago, the compensation plan that we built out. And then finally, in addition to all of that, there is some one-time money that's budgeted in 2022 alone that will be a one-time non-base contribution for every employee. So one-time 1%, approximately 1% for all employees. The reason that's there is the bigger change to the compensation package as a whole is there's a number of shifts in the health insurance design, especially to the deductible and co-pays specifically, as well as pharmaceuticals. An administrative committee has been weighing in on these things. But suffice it to say, you're talking about hundreds of dollars a month on the deductible side, which for us, for employees, is an HSA. So that's a dollar for dollar. And then on the copay side, there's a lot of new copays introduced that have never existed before. And then there's an 80-20 split for the county and the individual, and that's a shared cost for everything. And there's a cap on that beyond the deductible and the HSA contribution. So there's a lot of changes that are happening, but that 1% one time was intended to help allow employees to put more into their HSA or, accommodate those copays, whatever it might be. And of course, in this time and space in the market, with what's happening with employees, it hopefully offsets and keeps us competitive in the market space. So I'm very proud of this budget. I'm especially thankful to Aaron Dahl, who's here today, and he can speak to all the details of this budget. Margie Hammers, who's part of that budget team, Dave Barber, who kind of leads the whole entire thing. I'm very confident that we've balanced those three areas, put the taxpayers first, but still delivered a budget that makes sure that we're able to provide services at a high quality that's very focused on what our priorities are. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to answer any questions. Aaron Dahl's here to dive into deeper detail as you see fit.
Okay, supervisors that aren't on executive committee, you guys have voice. So if you have any comments, feel free to buzz in and I'll we'll begin with Supervisor Bosch.
I want, am I on? Oh, there we go. I want to thank the county executive and I want to thank Aaron Dahl for all their work on this budget. I love being able to not only reduce the tax rate, but the tax levy. So thank you for your work in doing that. Thank you also for your work in getting this pay plan with merit increases in there. I've never liked the idea of a job that gives everybody the same pay raise for just showing up. I like the idea that the people that go above and beyond are going to be rewarded for that. So thank you for that. On the commuter express, I like that we're going to set ourselves up to have that conversation. Concern I have is I thought that there were, with the shared ride taxi, there were federal dollars that potentially get sacrificed if we don't have the commuter express. So I think that's a factor we got to consider. Yeah, I don't know all the ins and outs as well as you do, so maybe you can add to that.
I can generically talk about it. Maybe Aaron or Margie can speak to it in more detail than I can. Generically speaking, that's true. We've accounted for it in this budget. There will be some fallback, but the bottom line is we are literally paying for buses to sit on off ramps with nobody in them right now. And so Supervisor Bolowa, when he was here, was very adamant that we needed to have a discussion about pulling out of this altogether. And I never disagreed with him, but to say, if we're going to do that, we need to decide what else. Now, in the midst of COVID, it's so acute that I don't think we can ignore it anymore. So I agree with your concern. We have accommodated to make sure that shared ride taxi is still funded so the service delivery is the same on that program. It may, in the long run, require us to put a little bit more skin in the game on the levy side. But in the end, we're to the point where we're throwing good money after bad and literally getting nothing. So, Aaron, is there anything else you want to speak to on that?
Not specifically, but you are correct in that there's some funding for one program contingent on having the other. Obviously, those programs are both funded across 22 and 23. Gives us some time to have that conversation in 24 about whether or not to have that specific program, the Commuter Express, or one like it that checks the boxes that we need to check to make sure our funding in the other areas is maintained. So they're both funded and it gives us time, but there's some redesign that needs to happen.
All right, thank you. And I agree that conversation needs to happen, especially if we have buses that are, as you said, sitting on an off ramp because they have no riders. That's an ineffective program and we need to have a good discussion about that by 2024. So thank you.
Yes, and I would just make it clear to this committee, and I ask you to pass this on to your fellow supervisors in the event it doesn't get talked about at the board level. We are necessarily putting ourselves in, rephrase that, we are intentionally putting ourselves in a situation where we will not have the levy to be able to provide the service we have for the last several years. We're literally kind of putting the proverbial gun to our head on, do you really want to be in this business? And if you do, you need to increase people's taxes to do it. I think there's a place for transit in Washington County. I hear all the time about whether it's individual social service appointments, mental health appointments, jobs that people can't afford the transportation to get to. You have to have a car to live in Washington County, essentially. You can't live, work, and get services if you don't. So there's certainly a space. What that conversation has to produce, in particular in the Public Works Committee, what it has to produce is an acknowledgement that transit is not, don't think of a taxi service. Transit is a social service. And if you can get yourself to think about it as a social service, then you have to have the dialogue on how much are we willing to pay and for what. And I don't have the answer to that question today. All I know is I'm not willing to pay any more money to have buses sit on off ramps. That's insanity. So I think this is actually going to be a very difficult conversation, especially knowing we put ourselves in the position of having to potentially raise taxes to do anything. But I don't think it's fair to taxpayers to do it any other way, to keep robbing from Peter to pay Paul for a program that's doing basically nothing.
Nicole Supervisor Schleif.
Tune in starting this month, next week, to Public Works, because that conversation is starting. There's a whole laundry list of different options and things and pros and cons, and it'll be a good discussion, but it's going to be a discussion item and then action probably in December. So stay tuned.
The actual cost per person per ride, it'll just blow you away. Yeah, about $100.
That's one way.
And that's exactly why I say we have got to move ourselves off of focusing. Historically, it's been we're taking people to Milwaukee to go work. Like for the last 15 to 20 years, that's what we've been doing. We've basically been subsidizing people to go work in Milwaukee. Instead, what I'm hearing is there's people internally who need transit services to get them to stuff here, including hospitals or healthcare and jobs. So when we think about the cost per transit ride that the county's subsidizing, I really think you've got to think about it in terms of just like we would on a welfare program. There's a certain threshold society has shown we're willing to pay if somebody's willing to eventually work their way out of that. So, but to date, we've allowed the Milwaukees of the world to drive this train, pardon the pun, or not pardon the pun. They turned it into a government subsidized train that goes in a circle and does nothing and think that that's okay. Well, you completely destroyed the purpose of what transit was intended to do originally, and that's get people to places who can't afford to buy a car and drive around Washington County. So I think it's gonna be a fascinating discussion, and we've got to be very conscious of what are we trying to accomplish? What is the goal we're trying to achieve? Because right now, I think it's gotten, mission creep isn't even sufficient to describe what has happened to us.
Yes, sir. Thank you. But before we throw out the water with the baby in it, let's be cognizant of the development that's happening in that Richfield Germantown corridor, where we've got everybody under the sun looking for work. We have a workforce in Milwaukee that could meet that need, but Milwaukee won't get them there. And I'm not sure how we make this work, but at some point in time, I think we need to be cognizant of the fact that there's going to be demand for labor to fill jobs there, but they don't have a way to get there. And you're for certain, we cannot rely on Milwaukee County to provide that. We need to keep that in the background with that thought in mind. Thank you, sir.
And remember, that's how it started. This started as a transit plan that brought people from Milwaukee up to employers in Washington County. And it didn't work. And so we flipped it and it turned into take people from Washington County to go work in Milwaukee County. And now we're back to the other way. So yes, you're correct. This all needs to be, how do we help people and what are we trying to accomplish?
Okay, any more discussion? Okay, we're gonna move right on into the action items. Resolution 20. What? Do what? I'm gonna come back to that. The resolution 2022-2023 budget appropriation. I'm gonna take a motion. Supervisor Mahalik, Supervisor Mary. Any further discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, resolution, authorization to transfer designated CIP funds from the jail expansion project to the radio system project. Got a motion, Supervisor Bossert, Supervisor Dice. Any questions about that? Seeing no discussion, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, resolution authorization to create a property tax relief fund. Need a motion, Supervisor Schleif, Supervisor Mary. Any questions regarding that?
I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Okay, pretty self-explanatory. Seeing no discussion, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the ordinance property tax relief fund 49-13. Need a motion? Supervisor Mahalik, Supervisor Mary? Any discussion?
Can I just make one clarification? So
Sure.
so you fully understand what you're doing? If you approve this, you're locking yourself in to requiring that this money stays where it is. And future boards need a 2/3 vote to really do any changes. That's a big freaking deal. To Supervisor Mahalik's point in the previous conversation, you're making 2/3 vote to basically not have a property tax relief fund. And you're forcing future boards essentially to cut property taxes. So I think it's worth probably saying out loud. I don't know. Yes, exactly.
You're here. Yeah, in this particular case, I guess you have stringing future boards to be fiscally responsible. So I'm all in favor of that. So any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion passes. You can be excused.
Thank you.
County. All right, we're gonna go back, consent agenda, minutes of September 15th, 2021. Motion to Supervisor Schleif, Supervisor Dice. All right, any changes? Any discussion on that? Seeing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye, any opposed? Okay. Motion. We'll move on to discussion items, recommendations by the County Board Structure Advisory Committee. Okay, any discussion on the recommendations? Oh, I'm sorry. Supervisor Mahalik.
I'm not sorry.
Aye.
Well, it is flattering to know that I've run the administrative committee so efficiently that they feel that they can just swallow it up in executive. Because of the fact that we're one of the very few, albeit this last meeting, that gets canceled because of lack of agenda items, because we have a lot that actually goes through administrative, and it is a lot of work. So I think the $900 is not going to cover what the members of the executive committee are going to end up with if they're going to do a decent job of actually taking on all of the things that the administrative committee does, because we do a lot to give the voters, the constituency, a say in a lot of what is done. We run a very, very complicated business with a lot of FTEs, with now a county executive, and we are the voice of the people. Now, everybody has to vote for Josh. Josh is the executive, and I understand that, but we are, because we've set up, the system. We are the Congress. We're the ones who are feet on the street, who knock all the doors, who really touch base with that. And given all of that, it's going to be interesting, because I think the workload of the members of the executive committee is going to increase more than you may realize. And I know that Supervisor Mary, having been on the administrative committee with me, and Supervisor Schleif, know what it was to have to go through and read the packet and fully understand it, because we did a lot of homework prior to going to the meetings, which is why we had a dedicated group that would actually do that. And I would hope that when we choose the chairs of the the 4 remaining committees, that they understand that you're going to have pick people who don't phone it in, who literally do everything that they can. And that's no criticism to anybody who's had to phone it in because of health or anything like that. Because even I know, being exposed to COVID once in a while, I'd have to be in a Zoom meeting. It wasn't referring to that. It was referring to those people who were just going to try and open up an envelope or look at a synopsis, 20 minutes before a meeting starts. That's not fair to the voters. That's not fair to your constituents. It certainly isn't fair to the other members of the county board. So please know that it's going to be very important with these changes to make sure that you're going to put people in these positions, those 4 positions for the 4 committees that are really going to do the work necessary to make sure that the voices of the folks are being heard. Otherwise, what we're doing is we're just handing it over to an administration. Now, we're all very happy with what Josh does, but again, that's not fair to the voters. The voters rely on us. And so this is going to concentrate a lot of work onto a very small amount of people because of what, for the administrative committee is the size of the executive committee with the county executive. And when you realize that, it's going to be a real handful. And just as the chair for the last number of years, I wanted to throw in my 2 cents worth because they're the only ones actually being really absorbed by that. So something to keep in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Bossert.
So I look at the proposed pay change for the 4 committee chairs. And I kind of break that down onto 2 separate issues. One being, should the members of the executive committee get paid more than regular county board supervisors? And then the other is county board supervisor pay itself where it should be? And so on the first one, even before I was on executive, it made sense to me that members of the executive board would make more. They're running meetings, they're involved in a lot more meetings. They have a lot of outside of official meetings with department heads. So, in my mind, it makes sense to pay executive committee people more. The second one, though, is one that doesn't make me very popular with other board members. But the last time I ran in a contested election, one of my promises was to try to reduce county board pay overall. We do make substantially more than city council members in West Bend make, school board members in West Bend make. So in my view, I'm not totally certain that we should be raising executive committee members versus lowering other supervisors. And, that's where I start out with this. I'm not sure how other people feel about that. But that's kind of the perspective I have and what I ran on. So thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Schleif.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The amount of time that we on executive and committee chairs put in addition to the normal, is very considerable. So I strongly support the difference in pay. Also, we're getting rid of 5 county board supervisors. So we are cutting the budget by 30,000. So in the big balance, I think this is a fair trade.
Supervisor Bishop.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a member of the Structure Advisory Committee, we had a very long discussion on this particular topic of supervisor pay and chairman pay. And you look at it as executive committee, we talked about it as chairman of those committees. And I think Mr. Mahalik made a very good point also that as your executive committee, you are taking on more work also. I think it more than justifies the increase that we are proposing for the chairs to receive. Actually, we had talked about making it higher, but they pulled back a little bit. we'll see in the next 2 years how it goes. That may change because you find your workload is so much bigger and there's a lot of responsibility there. And it's important to recognize the people who take on this responsibility. We don't get a lot for being on the county board, but it is a way to say, thank you for giving your time. And I don't think we should thumb our noses at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Mary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would echo what Supervisor Bishop and Supervisor Schleif have said. As chair of one of the committees, there's a lot more work than just getting your packet on, opening your packet Tuesday noon and coming in on Wednesday night for a meeting. There are all the ancillary programs that go along with it, the obligation or the inferred obligation to be at various activities that maybe you didn't really want to go to, but you just felt you needed to be there because after all, this was involving an activity for which you have oversight at the county level. And I think it's very fair to raise that. And if I recall, we had quite the extensive discussion probably 2 years ago now, because no sitting board can raise money for itself, about getting to where we are now with the regular board pay. But in terms of offering the extra to the chairs, yes, we're going back from 26 to 21 people. There's going to be more work. And I have no problem with with the increase, sir.
Thank you. Supervisor Dice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I like to wait till the end after everyone has spoken because then I can keep my comments very short. I concur with everything that's been said by my fellow supervisors here, so I'm in support of these changes. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. The one thing that I want to make everyone cognizant of, the $3,600 that is gonna you use to fund the raise. One of the things we have done is put together, or we're going to have employing a legislative aide for the county board. And the money that we saved from the reduction in supervisors, that money was to go to that. So realize that when everybody be cognizant of this $3,600 is going to come from somewhere else to pay for our legislative aid. So everybody knows that. Supervisor Bossert.
Yeah, so just to clarify, so everybody understands, I'm not against people who are on the executive committee, who are committee chairs, earning more than regular county board supervisors. I am saying that as a group, we're probably a little bit overpaid. So instead of increasing the committee chairs, I would suggest we're better off decreasing. And so we get to the same, difference, but decreasing the base county board pay. When you look at what the city council of West Bend makes, I believe it's $200 a month. And I believe the school board is at $250 a month, but I may have those reversed. So, yep. So, and part of this is public service. We're here to serve the community. And yeah, we incur expenses with that. But that's what I'm suggesting. I know it's not the popular opinion in the room, but that's what my belief is. And that's what I ran on in 2018. That's what my constituents expect of me. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, well, that comes up in a little bit. All right, seeing no further discussion on this, we will move into no, we have the county redistricting. So. Don't we have a? All right, need a motion. Supervisor Mary, Supervisor Schleif. Going to begin with the great Eric Damcott. Yeah, he continues to impress me with the job. Sure, yeah. Can-
If
can-
it's on the internet, we can turn on the screen if you'd like.
West. Well, I thought we had an ordinance for this too, no? Okay, just discussion, we do it. Okay, we're gonna do it. Okay. Yeah. Don't make me have to call you out of order.
All right, I'm going to start out by saying that certainly the wasn't without a few stressful moments, but our local governments really came through for us. Every one of them, and I know we have some local officials past and present here in the room, and for all of them to get this done in the short amount of time that we had was really quite remarkable and fun to be a part of. So since you've last voted on this plan, there's been 9 census blocks that switched districts in order to change from the tentative to what you're voting on today. I'm going to go through the first one in a little more detail and then breeze through the other ones because it's really all variations on a theme. What I'm showing here today is online. If you go to washcowisco.gov under the GIS division, there's a 2021 redistricting page where you can view this story. The first one is the town of Barton. If you're driving out of town on 33, Cedar Lake Sales is actually in the town of Barton, not city West Bend. Traditionally, we've put this in the city district to make that supervisory district contiguous. What we did this time in 8 cases is we've taken these island territory and we put them in the supervisory district with the majority of the municipality. What that does is it creates a non-contiguous supervisory district, which is normally not okay, but it's okay in cases where you're dealing specifically with island territory. What this does for the town of Barton is they don't have to create a ballot, and really Ashley as well, is they won't have to create a ballot style for this census block where nobody lives in it. And even though nobody lives in it, it would require an extra ballot be printed in just in case somebody would come and try to register in that area. So this town of Barton doesn't create an extra ward, they combine it with an existing ward. It prevents that ballot style. What it does mean though, is that if in the next 10 years, the city of West Bend were to annex this parcel for any reason, they can't add it to the ward that surrounds it. They would have to create a separate ward for it because it would remain in the supervisory district in which it's in. So just be aware of that. So you're going to see a variation of theme. There's no people who live here. It's just moving it from tentative supervisory district 1, which is a city district, to tentative supervisory district 6, which is made up of the town of Barton and the town of Farmington. So again, you're gonna see this a lot. So the next one is in the city of Hartford. I'm less familiar with this area, but you can see that the city of Hartford recently annexed this large area. There's nobody living in there currently. It was put into supervisory district 9 originally to be contiguous, requested district 11, which is the supervisory district that the area of the city of Hartford to the south is located in. Again, 0 population there. So town of Hartford has 2. The city of Hartford went ahead and annexed the right of way, which is what is that, County Highway N, but didn't annex all the parcels south of that right of way. So what it does is it creates an island of the town. So again, just like the other ones, there's currently 0 people who live in the census block. Was originally put in tentative district 11 to be contiguous. Requested district is district 9, which is where the rest of the town of Hartford is in. Right next door, you have these 2 areas in the city of Hartford. Again, 0 population. Put put in tentative District 11 to be contiguous, requested a District 9, which is where the rest of the town of Hartford is in. Town of Jackson, you have this small area. This one does actually have 10 people in it. But again, completely surrounded. Originally put in District 20, which is otherwise completely Village of Jackson. Requested district is 21, which puts it into a district with other Town of Jackson residents. It does change your deviations just a little bit on that those districts, but because these are neither the largest nor the smallest districts in the plan, it doesn't change your overall plan deviation at all. No. No, we are not moving supervisors in any of the examples that are going to be talked about today. Town of Trenton, we're on the south side of West Bend. This is the Milwaukee Tool area where they're building that. They annexed a good chunk, but of course they left this area, which is still the town of Trenton, completely surrounded. There are 8 people who live in here. Tentative District 5 to be contiguous, requested District 19, which is more of a town of Trenton district. City of West Bend, they have 2. This is out by the airport. From my understanding, this is a height restricted area, so it will never be developed. 0 people live in here. Included in District 19, which is really a town of Trenton district. Very short, I understand. Put in District 19 to be contiguous. That district was, again, predominantly a town district. Requested District 3, which is a city district, prevents the city from creating a ward there. 0 population. This is the one example that's different from everything else that we've talked about. What you see here is the census block that includes City of West Bend Hall. And there are 42 people who live in here. Originally, the Supervisory District 4 went down on South Main Street and then headed east on Vine. What the city is requesting that we do is instead clip out the census block and put that into District 5 instead of District 4. Their reason for doing this is because City Hall serves as a polling place for whichever city district is to the southeast here. And they were unable to add that census block and still create legal wards and have that census block be in the district for which it serves as its polling place. So by moving that one census block, they're able to create legal wards and put it within the alderperson district for which it serves as its polling place. In addition, so I guess what you need to be aware of for this one is that requested District 4 now becomes your smallest district in the plan. It goes from being 191 people under the target population down to 233 people under the target population. And because it's the smallest district, what it does is it increases your overall plan deviation from 7.11 to 7.28. Typically what they say is that if it's under 10%, you're constitutional. So we are well within that 10%, but it does increase your overall plan deviation just a bit. And the last one in the town of West Bend, if you're familiar with the Ralph's dog park, there is one parcel there with 2 people living in it. That is still town of West Bend. So originally that was put into tentative District 5, which again is a city district. The request is to put it into District 14, which is an area where most of the rest of the town of West Bend is in. And again, all the reasons as before. So those are the 9 census blocks. And if I hadn't pointed them out, you probably wouldn't have seen them on the map because they're so small. But those are the 9 census blocks that are different from what you approved last month in the tentative plan. All 9 of these have already been incorporated into the approved ward plans that the municipalities adopted. So if you don't like any of these, then it's a conversation back with the municipalities to amend their ward plans. That's what I have.
Any questions? Any discussion? Okay. Seeing none, Vote on this. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thanks again, Eric.
You're very welcome. Happy to help.
Next tentative meeting date, Wednesday, November 10th, 2021 at 5:15 prior to county board. And Wednesday, the regular meeting on the 17th at 4:30 PM. We're hereby adjourned. Thank you, everybody.